my heart an insatiable desire to read His Word, and that daily reading of God's Word has shaped who I am. And every day on Exploring the Word, Bert Harper and I teach the Word so that fire and love for Scripture will be in your heart as well.
Exploring the Word, weekday afternoons at 3 Central on American Family Radio.
3 months before she was exonerated, they were already drafting the statement. Doesn't that sound like it was cooked?
Yes, it does. It sounds like the thumb is on the scale.
Why would the Russians want Donald Trump to be president of the United States where they can get everything they want from Hillary Clinton? Whether it's uranium, whether it's undermining our defense by cutting military spending, by refusing to secure our border. Why in the world would the Russians want Trump?
He's the president of the United States. Refusing to cooperate, I think, will speak volumes.
The judge was not told that this dossier was the product of Democratic funding.
The FBI and Department of Justice did disclose to the FISA court that this was likely supported by a political act with a political motivation. I think it's very misleading to suggest that the FISA court had no idea there might be a political motivation.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome to today's brand new edition of Focal Point on the American Family Radio Talk Network. American Family Radio Network. Brian Fisher is my name. Congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent. As always, welcome aboard the USS Focal Point. It is our warship. Man your battle stations. Going to 2 hours of unremitting and unrelenting cultural war as we take on the strongholds of lies, error, deception, and deceit that hold our culture and so many people in it in bondage. The scriptures tell us that these strongholds, every high thing, every line of reasoning that is raised up against the knowledge of God. So we want to tear them down because these are the things that keep people from coming into a relationship with God, from acquiring the knowledge of God. We want everybody to know God, so that's why we take on these strongholds. We train the heavy guns on board the USS Focal Point right at these strongholds to demolish them and to pull them down. And the apostle says we have weapons of our warfare. They're not carnal, but they are divinely powerful. They are powerful in God for the pulling down of strongholds, and primary among them is the truth. When we declare the truth, that is launching an offensive weapon in the weaponry that God's outfitted us to engage in cultural warfare. Now, our reading is taking us in pray.afa.net, that's where you can find the schedule, to the book of Job. Now, this is one of the great books in the Old Testament because it deals with the issue of suffering when bad things happen to good people. And we find out that bad things do happen to good people. Job was a good man. God himself testified that he was upright and blameless, that he turned to God and he turned away from doing evil. In fact, God was the one that drew Satan's attention to Job. Hey, have you noticed my servant Job? He's upright, he's blameless, he is upright in all of his actions. Have you noticed him? And Satan says, well, that's just because he serves you because you put a hedge around him. You drop the hedge and let me go after him, he'll curse you to your face. So God says, well, permission granted. So Satan went after him, destroyed his family, killed all of his children, destroyed his wealth, destroyed all of his livestock in which his wealth was centered. Now in chapters 4 and 5, and so Job is in mourning. He's in terrible grief over the loss of his 10 children. And his friends, there's 3 of them, they come supposedly to comfort him. They come to visit him. So they gather around him. And the interesting thing is they were doing great until they opened their mouths and started to talk. When they just sat with Job, when they were just a presence with him, their presence was encouraging. So sometimes we can do more harm than good by starting to talk to our friends that are in grief, or they're in pain because of some kind of setback, some kind of rehearsal or reversal. And what his friends do is they just start mouthing these theological platitudes to Job. You ever been in that situation? You know that those theological platitudes, as true as they might be, they're not really that helpful because they don't get at you. I mean, you know it. When they're telling you that theological platitude, you agree with it. But it doesn't reach you because you have to be touched at a level of the Spirit. God's got to take that word. You've got to find a way to reflect on that word and invite the Spirit of God to bring that to life in your soul and in your heart. Job's friends hadn't learned that yet. They had a very shallow theology, and that was where the problems came. You know, they say a lot of good things here in chapters 4 and 5, but it was all irrelevant because it didn't apply to Job's situation. Because their view, their shallow theology is that if you experience trouble or evil or affliction or disaster, that's just God finding you out, exposing you, and disciplining you for your hidden and concealed sin. So his friends say, look, that's what's going on here, Job. You've got unconfessed sin in your life. God sees it. We don't, but God does. And he's bringing that to light. The best thing for you to do, Job, is to come clean and admit what you've done, and God will come to your aid. You know, the Bible says if you sow to the flesh, you shall from the flesh reap corruption. You're reaping corruption. Therefore, Job, you must have been sowing to the flesh. And Job says, no, I haven't been sowing to the flesh. I can't think of one single thing that I've done that represents a sin against God. You know, and Job did not know what God thought of him, but we have God on record in chapter 1 that God himself said, look, Job is a man that fears God, and he turns away from evil, and God himself said he's blameless and upright, and there is none like him on the earth. I have no one on earth like him. So we do see that bad things can happen to good people, and it's not necessarily because of sin on their part. And that's one of the first things we flash to. Well, is there any unconfessed sin in your life? And it's not bad to ask that question. It's always appropriate to ask that question. But if the answer is no, they cannot identify any unconfessed sin, then you just move on because that's unlikely to be the cause of their suffering. It wasn't in Job's case, but we still see that God in the end had a plan for Job's suffering, and that's what we hang on to, that God knows what he's doing. He's sovereign, and he is working something in our lives through this suffering. Now, Eliphaz, who's the first guy that spoke, he actually wound up being deceived by demonic forces, and his counsel to Job actually came from a demon. He said this in chapter 4, verse 12, now a word was brought to me stealthily, my ear received the whisper of it, amid thoughts from visions of the night, when deep sleep falls on men, dread came upon me, and trembling, which made all my bones shake, a spirit glided past my face, the hair of my flesh stood up, it stood still, but I could not discern its appearance. A form was before my eyes, there was silence, then I heard a voice. Can mortal man be in the right before God? Can a man be pure before his Maker? And that's what he hammered Job with. Look, mortal man cannot be right before God. Man cannot be pure before his Maker. You're saying that you're blameless and upright. You can't be right, Job, because I just heard from a spirit. He's thinking it's a spirit from God, but the spirit was lying to him. Is it possible for a man to be right before God? The answer is yes. God himself says that's the nature of Job as he walks before me. Well, let's go to prayer for ourselves and for our friends. Father, I pray that we will choose to accept the discipline that comes from you and to remember that the one whom you reprove is blessed. I pray that when you wound us, you will bind us up, and when you shatter, you will heal us with your hands. By your grace, may each of us, like Job did, instruct many and strengthen the hands of those who are weak. May our words uphold the one who is stumbling and make feeble knees firm. Lord, we see that Eliphaz offered counsel to Job that came from his error of thinking that all suffering is a result of sin. We all have friends who suffer, Lord. We see that Job's friends provided the greatest comfort when they simply sat with him in silence and grieved with him. Grant us wisdom to show how to show sympathy and bring comfort to our friends. Amen.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or more importantly, if you signed up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare. MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing program that's been around for 25 years, and they have hundreds of thousands of members all across the country. And get this, over the years, MediShare members have shared more than $1 billion of each other's medical bills. Best of all, you could save a lot of money with MediShare. The typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. Your savings could be more or less, but think about what you could do with that extra money. Think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have a lot to offer? Well, think again. You can join MediShare anytime, so call them today and check it out. Here's the number to find out more, and there's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
But they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Corner. In a press release, the ACLU complained President Trump said the word America more than 80 times during his State of the Union address. Someone may want to remind them what the A stands for in ACLU. More importantly, it exemplifies that robust love for America and advocacy for an America First agenda on the world stage is inherently offensive to regressive sensibilities. The only vision some have for America is one of managed decline. It's a sad day when the word America becomes censorable to Americans.
Listen to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Central on AFR. For more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Debbie she keeps track of our checkbook for us. She's better with numbers and stuff than I am. And she couldn't balance the checkbook last week. She was off, I think, by, $5.31 or something like that. So that happens. You're balancing your checkbook, and you're off by a few bucks here and there. Well, the Pentagon auditor just balanced the books at the Pentagon. They were off by $800 million. $800 million is missing, and they have no idea where it went. So take comfort from that if you aren't able to balance your checkbook every once in a while.
That's incredible.
And then there's a guy named Shelby Mustang GT500. He actually changed his name to Shelby Mustang GT500. Got arrested for driving without a license.
Oh, man.
He said, I don't need no stinking license. My name is my license, officer.
What was he driving?
He was driving a...
I bet it wasn't a Shelby.
Let's see. What was he driving? This is in Arkansas. He was...
a Prius or something.
Miller's car model was not identified, but police say he was not driving a GT500. So...
yeah.
They probably wouldn't have caught him if he was driving.
Isn't that his first brush with the law? Back in 2014, he got arrested in Des Moines, Iowa, got into an argument at a bar. He left and returned with an axe.
Oh, man.
I guess started hacking at stuff in the bar. So he got booked on charges of public intoxication, going armed with intent, and violating parole. Nobody was injured in the event.
Was that before he became Shelby?
Yeah, that was maybe before he changed his name. Maybe that's why he changed his name, for I could dodge that old beef. They won't catch up to me if I got a different name. So, all right. Let's turn our attention to content today. Got a story here about the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm not going to take a lot of time with this thing, but it's a story on how central to the football team, the Philadelphia Eagles, is their Christian faith. And the story I'm looking at here is from Breitbart.com, and it's a picture of the Eagle players. This is what I saw before. Jeff, this is the Eagle players in a hotel swimming pool, and a guy is getting baptized there. His name is Marcus Johnson. After the baptismal ceremony, he sends out a tweet, "First time being baptized. Corporate worship is a beautiful thing. Cleansed and reborn in Jesus' name."
Amen.
And he had exclamation points after all of those. So you got the quarterback that started and won the game for them, Nick Foles. He's a very strong believer. Carson Wentz, who was the quarterback before him until he got hurt, also a very strong believer. Torrey Smith was a wide receiver for the 49ers last year. He went to the Eagles this year. Here's what he had to say. "I went to church often growing up, but it wasn't until I was in my last year of college where I realized I was kind of living off of everyone else's salvation. I wasn't really finding out things on my own. I wasn't diving into the Word or exploring the way I was exploring everything else around me. That's when I kind of realized I was living the wrong way." You know, so when I talk about the importance of becoming independently dependent upon God, this is what I'm talking about. Torrey Smith said, that was my problem. I was dependent upon God, but I was not independently dependent upon God. I was too dependent on the people around me to sustain my faith and to nourish me. So anyway, good things happening, at least with the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFL. You might have heard of Rob Bell. He is this heretical pastor, and he's kind of proud of it. He's participating in a new documentary that's entitled The Heretic. It's going to be released on March 1. So rather than being embarrassed by the things that he believes, he's proud of it. He's proud to have a movie made with that title, featuring him in the starring role. One of the latest things that he said is the Bible has caused so much damage in many ways. It's often been an agent of dragging everything backwards. Well, that's not the Bible's doing.
No.
It could be people who misuse the Bible, people who mishandle the Bible, because people misinterpret it and mishandle it all the time. But that's not the fault of the Bible. And he also said Jesus would be absolutely mortified that somebody started a religion in his name. Absolutely mortified that somebody started a religion in his name. But you go to Matthew 18, and Jesus talks about exercising discipline where? In the church. So he used the word church. I'm starting a church. In fact, he told Peter, he said, look, the gates of Hades will not prevail against the church. It's on the move, it's on the march, and the church is going to overcome all of the satanic resistance that exists. So here's Rob Bell. He is dragging things backward by misinterpreting the scriptures, exactly what we talked about. You know, and Paul talks about those that distort the word of God to their own destruction. Well, that's Rob Bell. So he is exemplifying the scriptures in what he does. That's the latest from Rob Bell. Now, I mentioned something about this yesterday, but I'm going to come back to this because I think that one of the wars that we are winning, ladies and gentlemen, is the war for the hearts and minds of the public on the topic of sexuality, on marriage and homosexuality is what I'm thinking of in particular. You know, and it seemed for the last number of years that the homosexual agenda is just swamping everything. It's driving everything before it. It's driving everybody into hiding, that one Christian after another is getting punished in the workplace. They're getting fired. They're getting fined. They're getting demoted. They're not getting hired because of their Christian faith. But that juggernaut is starting to slow down, and it's got the LGBT activists in a panic. You know, one story I read a couple of weeks ago was there's almost no traction this year for bills in legislatures that advance the homosexual agenda. Nobody's wanting to introduce them. When they do, they don't go anywhere. They just lay there. Right now, there's just no energy behind the homosexual agenda. And part of the problem, I want to be sure I put this the right way, and I want to put it succinctly because I think this is something that's worth remembering. The difference between the truth and error is that truth is its own defense. It is self-authenticating. You ponder the truth, you see the truth, you reflect on the truth, and there's something about it that just rings true. It's self-verifying. It's self-authenticating, but lies have to be propped up. They have to be supported. They've got to be propped up because they can't stand on their own. And I think the problem with the homosexual agenda, it's built on a complete tissue of lies. So I think we've kind of reached peak gay, and we're starting to move beyond that, and we're heading back, I believe, toward an understanding of sexual normalcy. Couldn't happen a moment too soon. Now, I don't want to be premature here. It's not like we've got there yet. I mean, there's still plenty of residual energy, a lot of inertia. You know, I think that maybe the motor has stopped powering this thing at the same speed it has been for the last decade, but that doesn't mean there's still not a lot of forward momentum, even though the engine may not be perking. That's a pretty sizable movement, pretty sizable energy, pretty sizable engine, so it's still going to be moving forward. We still need to fight that battle. We still need to stand against that, but I think are indications that we are beginning to win this battle. This is from LifeSite News. Acceptance of LGBT people, which had experienced a dramatic upswing in recent years, has peaked and begun to decline, according to a report unveiled by the LGBT media advocacy group GLAAD. The GLAAD report, based on a Harris poll, set off loud alarm bells, sirens, and flashing lights in gay and mainstream media. One headline trumpeted, "Shocking report finds acceptance of LGBTQ people is rolling backwards in the age of Trump." This is what Harris Polling said. In a single year, we've seen significant declines from what had been an increasingly accepting America to one now less supportive. In last year's report, 53% of Americans said they were very or somewhat comfortable with LGBT people. This year, that figure dropped 4 points to 49%, nearly an 8% decrease. So what they're talking about here is how comfortable people are around those that are involved in the homosexual lifestyle. And I think probably the number was up to 53% because people were lying to pollsters. I think it's a very difficult thing to tell a pollster the truth about your instinctive reaction to the homosexual lifestyle, because when people start thinking about what happens in homosexual encounters, there's a pretty significant ick factor. I mean, people understand without having to be told there's something grossly unnatural about that kind of sexual behavior. And so when people find out that someone is engaged in that kind of behavior, that's not a comfortable place to be, because they understand there's something fundamentally at odds with nature about the way these people are behaving. It's not something that they're comfortable with, not something they can wrap their heads around, not something that they're ready to support and say, hey, that is just terrific kind of lifestyle. Those are great sexual decisions to make with your life and with your body. So anyway, I think that's some good news. We are starting to make some advances against the homosexual agenda. Long way to go, but I think maybe we have reached peak gay and things are beginning to turn. Still got a lot of work to do on the whole issue of gender. Harvard is banning single-sex organizations, but they might give a reprieve to female groups. What is that? That's sexism. So Harvard says you can't have a single-sex organization. The women say, well, what about us? That's not fair. Harvard says, okay, you're girls, we'll give you a pass. The guys don't get a pass, we will give you one. That is just blatant sexism is all that is. Now, I've got we will play the soundbite. Rob, get the soundbite with Justin Trudeau ready to go. When we come back, we'll talk about Justin Trudeau mansplaining gender issues to all of us. You'll get a kick out of this. By the way, incest is making a comeback, a very heavy comeback in the Muslim world, But here is a woman who is planning to marry her father after having his baby. The father had given her up for adoption when she was a baby. She contacted him when she turned 18. They hooked up, conceived a child together, and the father left his wife for his daughter and their coming baby. That's another example of sexual deviance, and people are not okay with that. Be right back.
This is Dr. Richard Lamb, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. Many critics of the House Intelligence Committee are protesting. We don't have all the information. There's a simple remedy for that. Release the supporting documents and let the people decide for themselves. I dare you. We know from the House Intelligence Memorandum that the director and deputy directors of the FBI, as well as the Attorney General and at least 2 Deputy Attorney Generals, certified these FISA applications for surveillance. In the interest of transparency and the pursuit of the truth, the question now has to be asked, how much higher did knowledge of this go? Above the Attorney General, who is there? Only the President of the United States, Barack Obama. To borrow a phrase from the Watergate controversy, we now have to ask this question. What did the President know, and when did the President know it? This is deadly serious. If our top law enforcement officials can justify spying on a presidential election campaign and then the victorious candidate's transition team, then what can they not do? Thank God the House Intelligence Committee exercised their constitutional oversight of the Justice Department, which is their duty. But I feel compelled to ask this question. Is this America or is it Argentina? Such disrespect for the rule of law and the Bill of Rights has no place in our country. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio. Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net. afa.net.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point American Family Radio. I mentioned Justin Trudeau, who's the Prime Minister of Canada. He mansplains to a woman in the audience and corrects her understanding of gender and grammar and all that kind of stuff. So here is the woman speaking from the bleachers in this gymnasium. He's emceeing this little seminar, and she speaks. She's with a Christian organization. She's a woman. She wants the rules relaxed so that more women can be involved in their outreach. I guess there's some kind of governmental restrictions on whatever. So she's asking Justin Trudeau to lighten up on that, and here's how their exchange went.
So that's why we came here today to ask you to also look into the policies that religious charitable organizations have in our legislation so that it can also be changed, because maternal love is the love that's going to change the future of mankind. So we'd like you to look into
we like to say people kind, not necessarily mankind.
People kind. You know, you look it up in the dictionary. You look the word people kind up in the dictionary. You know what you find? A little phrase, no definitions found. So people kind, Mr. Trudeau, is not even a word. Mankind, on the other hand, is a word. Here's what somebody said in response to this gender PC nonsense. He issues a trigger warning to Justin Trudeau. He said this: the postman told me today that they don't really have the manpower to manage all their work. So I've invited fresh men from our local university to help, but they are busy giving mandatory help to firemen this week, and they're not available. Ben Shapiro said this: Justin Trudeau is what would happen if the song Imagine took human form and then ate a Tide Pod. So, the human Tide Pod. Now, let's see. We had a couple of questions that came up yesterday. I want to follow up on the research. One had to do with the number of presidents who won election without winning the popular vote. Turns out there are 5. John F. Kennedy was not one of them. We found that out by the end of that segment, that he defeated Richard Nixon by about 112,000 votes. But there are 5 presidents who won the presidency by winning a majority of the electoral votes. Remember, in a presidential election, those are the only votes that count. You win a majority of those votes, you've won because you got a majority of the votes that count. Nothing cheap about it. You got a majority of the votes that actually count. John Quincy Adams won in 1824 against Andrew Jackson. Rutherford B. Hayes won against Samuel J. Tilden in 1876. Benjamin Harris lost by 95,000 votes to Grover Cleveland. I don't know, did I get that right? John Quincy Adams lost the popular vote by 44,000 votes to Andrew Jackson. Rutherford B. Hayes lost the popular vote to Samuel J. Tilden, 1876. Benjamin Harris lost the popular vote to Grover Cleveland, 1888. George W. Bush lost the popular vote to Al Gore in 2000. And Donald Trump lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton in 2016. You know, interesting thing is Bush lost by 544,000 votes. Trump lost by 2.8 million. So it's interesting to see that gap kind of widen there, even though the more conservative of the two candidates won the election. Now, the other thing I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about what we touched on yesterday, is what Islam teaches about Christ as the Messiah. And it turns out, by the way, that Christ is labeled in the Qur'an as the Messiah. Now, before we jump into that, interesting story. There are 3 American heroes who are playing themselves in a Clint Eastwood movie. It's going to premiere in short order. It's called The 1517 to Paris. That's the train. There were 3 members of the military. They were on this train. There was a jihadist on board that launched a jihadist attack in the middle of the train ride. These 3 guys, with no weapons, jumped into the fray and disarmed the guy and protected everybody on the plane. It turns out the way they got cast is they were initially hired as technical advisors. So Clint Eastwood is setting things up, and he wants, okay, now what did you guys do here, and why did you do it? Now, how did you do that? What was the maneuver you used there, and why did you do it that way? So they were acting as technicians, describing to Clint Eastwood exactly how things happened, what happened, and exactly how. And they kept going over it and over it and over it again. And finally, after they got over about 8 or 9 times, finally, Clint Eastwood said, would you guys like to do this? And Spencer Stone said, don't you think we ought to take acting lessons? And Clint Eastwood said, no, please don't. So anyway, they got the starring roles in the movie playing themselves, The 1517 to Paris. I'm not recommending it because I haven't seen it. I don't know what the rating is. Maybe a little bit strong for some. But anyway, I thought it was a cute little story. The Department of Homeland Security at one point issued a draft form calling for the long-term surveillance in the United States of Sunni Muslim immigrants. Now, it hasn't been implemented yet. And now that it's leaked out, I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of blowback. The 25 terrorist attacks in the United States between October of 2001 and December of 2017 were all carried out by immigrants, and most of them were Sunni Muslims who are particularly vulnerable to terrorist narratives, according to the DHS. They're young, they're male, they have national origins in the Middle East, South Asia, and Africa. This report claimed that 3 out of every 4 individuals convicted of international terrorism in the United States were immigrants. And so the DHS drafted this report. We need to do long-term surveillance on this community, just as New York City did under Michael Bloomberg, and they shut terrorism down in New York pretty much completely. Then the politically correct folks got involved saying you can't do that. and that got wiped out, and now terrorism is back in New York City. Guys driving cars and trucks over people right and left. Now, the jihadist who is responsible for the Mall of America stabbing spree in Bloomington, Minnesota, he entered the United States as a legal immigrant with foreign relatives. This is the chain migration that Donald Trump wants to end. So that's the guy that went through the Mall of America, just started swinging his knife and stabbing people right and left. The guy that plotted to carry out an attack last year was a guy by the name of Abdirrahman Sheikh Mohammed. He's from Somalia. He trained with a terrorist organization in Syria, and he obtained his citizenship. He's one that came in via chain migration. Ahmed Amin El Mafti, a 51-year-old from Egypt, targeted Pennsylvania police officers in December 2017. He entered the U.S. as a foreign relative of a naturalized citizen. That's chain migration. Assisted suicide bomber Aqaid Ullah from Bangladesh attempted to detonate a bomb in New York City in an ISIS-inspired attack. He arrived in the U.S. as a foreign relative of a naturalized citizen. And we see chain migration, visa lottery, the two guys that carried out terrorist attacks in New York. That's how they got in the country. Now, I want to talk in the last few minutes of this segment about the Quranic verses that do mention the term Messiah. I actually pulled out my copy of the Quran and kind of marked it up. It's pretty well marked up because I wanted to read the Quran for myself, and so I did from beginning to end. Now, here are some of the verses in the Quran. This is Surah 4, verse 157. They declared, "We have put to death the Messiah, Jesus, the son of Mary, the apostle of God." So that was the claim of the enemies of Christ according to the Quran, according to Muhammad. They claimed, "We have killed Jesus, the Messiah." Muhammad says they did not kill him, nor did they crucify him. They just thought they did. Literally, that verse says he was made to resemble another for them. So it says Christ actually got down off of the cross before he was crucified. Somebody else died in his place. That wasn't the Messiah that died on the cross. That was somebody else. So this is the Quran itself. So they deny, and we just read it, Muhammad himself denies the crucifixion of Christ. You just heard it for yourself. They did not kill him. They thought they did, but they didn't. So Islam denies, Muhammad denies the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And remember, without the crucifixion, without the sacrificial death of Christ, there is no forgiveness of sins. There's no eternal life. There's no victory over the grave. Now here is Surah 4, verse 171. People of the book, do not transgress the bounds of your religion. Speak nothing but the truth about God. The Messiah, the son of Mary, was no more than God's apostle and his word. So he was no more than an apostle. He was an apostle. We'll give him that. But he was no more than that. He wasn't the son of God. So Muhammad goes on, believe in God and his apostles and do not say three. God is but one God. God forbid that he should have a son. So Muhammad, in the Quran, I just read you the words, denies emphatically that the Father, that Allah, that God has a son. Then he says this in Surah 5, verse 17, unbelievers are those who declare God is the Messiah, the son of Mary. So anybody that says the Messiah is God in human form is an unbeliever and not destined, therefore, for paradise. Now you go over to Surah 571. Unbelievers are those who say that God is the Messiah, the son of Mary. So they say that's the definition of an unbeliever. If you think that that the Messiah was God in human form, he goes on, he that worships other deities besides God, God will deny him paradise, and the fire shall be his home. None shall help the evildoers. Unbelievers are those who say God is one of three. We're referring to the Trinity. If they do not desist from saying, they shall be sternly punished. Back in 2.
You wish you could stop thinking about it, but you can't. It never quite leaves your thoughts. Even in the joyful moments, it's there. The sadness, shame, and sorrow. You know you can't go on like this, so don't. Phone the International Helpline for Abortion Recovery at 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who's already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
Dave?
Over here, John. Thanks for meeting me like this.
What are we doing in here?
Well, you're one of the only people I know who shares my Christian beliefs. And this is the only place I know we won't offend anyone.
Don't cave to the pressures of society. Stand. Blog and share your thoughts on subjects that matter. See what others are saying and join the discussion at The Stand. Visit afa.net/The Stand.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I had a lot of credit card debt and I couldn't pay my bills. I was feeling so bad. I got to a point where I needed some help. So I reached out and contacted Trinity.
If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813 to talk to a certified counselor.
They were able to take all of my different payments and put them all together.
Trinity will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, reduce your interest, and possibly improve your credit score. You'll save thousands.
And they were actually able to work with my creditors. I've been able to pay off close to $15,000 in the last 18 months.
If your debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Stephanie, and I'm debt-free for keeps.
1-800-788-1813.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
And welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Number to call if you want to jump in on the conversation, 888-589-8840. Talk about anything we've talked about today, 888-589-8840. Particularly interested in your observations, comments, questions about Islam in general, specifically the mentions of Christ as the Messiah in the Qur'an. The Messiah, that term occurs 11 times in the Qur'an. So it was an education for me because I thought at first blush yesterday that it wasn't in there at all, but it's in there a total of 11 times. And I went through each one of those verses. There's 9 verses where the term Messiah occurs, and we learned a lot about how Muhammad and Islam views the person of Christ, views the Messiah. So number to call if you want to jump in on that part of our conversation or touch on anything else that we have talked about in this first hour, give us a call, 888-589-8840.
You know, Brian, it's not very often that you turn into a Christian radio station and hear somebody going through the Quran, but that was really interesting. I mean, to actually hear from their own book what they believe, that was, I'm glad you did that.
Well, I thought it'd be very instructive. You know, they were verses that I've read before because I've read through the whole Quran, but they didn't stick out in my mind. I didn't remember them. Mm-hmm. I went and looked at the front of my copy of the Quran, and I've got all the mentions of Jesus. I've got them noted, but I didn't specifically mark out the ones that referred to him as the Messiah. So very helpful, and again, that's from the Quran itself. There isn't any misinterpretation there. That's Muhammad's words, his own self. 888-589-8840. You guys will love this. I got to get back to your phone calls and stuff. This is a great story. This is not as good. This is not as good as the human Tide Pod. I know some of you, I've seen it on Facebook. Some of you kind of like that. But there's this Scottish farmer. He made a frantic call. You know about this?
No, you just, it sounds like you're going to make fun of my Scottish background.
Oh, I forgot. My apologies, Jeff. Let me apologize ahead of time here.
Is that your disclaimer now?
That's my disclaimer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Now that I've apologized, I can say anything I want about the Scottish people. A Scottish farmer, this is from the New York Post, frantically called the cops. 911, I got a tiger in my cowshed. So the armed police showed up, and they had a standoff with this tiger for 45 minutes. The first police officer that showed up didn't even want to get out of the car. He was scared to get out of the car. They called the local wildlife park to see if they had a tiger on the loose. They didn't. After a 45-minute standoff, they realized that the supposedly terrifying beast was a big plush toy.
What?
It was a big, giant, stuffed tiger that somebody put in his cowshed, and he saw it in the dusk, in the half dark, and thought it was a real live tiger.
Jeff,
so
what'd you do that for?
Freaked out. So.
Yeah, you can see a couple guys at the pub like, we really got McGowan, didn't we?
Yeah. Yeah, so that maybe that tells you all you need to know about the Scottish people. One, that they would do something like that, and number two, that they'd get fooled by something like that.
I was thinking any tiger that could make it through the weather and hardiness of Scotland to find a barn, it deserves to stay there. You know what I mean? I'd be scared of him too.
Earned the right. Yeah.
Leave the tiger
Well, the
alone.
farmer was afraid the guy was going to, start working on his herd.
Yeah.
So he wanted to protect his investment. All right, 888-589-8840 is the number. Let's go to Clifton in Virginia. Clifton, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Yes, sir. I'd like to address your statement there about the Islam.
Yeah.
Apostle Paul addressed this very item in the Bible. I don't have my Bible in front of me, but it's either Galatians or Colossians. I think it's Galatians. He said, if me or an angel would come to you with another gospel, let him be accursed. We have two religions in the world that the leaders, founders of those religions, claim that an angel come to them with this gospel. And the Apostle Paul also says, since that would happen, try the spirits, for there's many spirits gone out into the world. Every spirit that does not say that Jesus Christ, which is Yeshua HaMashiach, has come in the flesh, it's a false spirit, a false Christ.
All right, there you go. And he absolutely correct. Clifton's absolutely correct. Muhammad received his revelation in a cave. In a dark cave was the first time that Gabriel was the way the angel identified himself, and that was a demon. That was not an angel of God. That was an angel of Satan, completely deceived Muhammad, dictated the contents of the Quran word for word to Muhammad because Muhammad was completely and utterly illiterate. All right, let's go to Jack in Heber Springs, Arkansas. Jack, welcome. What's on your mind? Jack, are you there? Go ahead.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I got you. Go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of Bible scholars now are tying in Islam with the Antichrist. I know they embrace the white horse of Revelation as conquering the conqueror, and Daniel speaks of a warlike God, and that they would think to change times and laws. I wonder why people ain't figuring this thing out. I mean, nobody studies prophecy anymore, it seems like, in the churches, but that's out there.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, the way I understand the book of Revelation is that Satan has always, since the first advent of Christ, he's been trying to unseat Christ as the ruler of the world ever since. There's a competition between Christ and Satan for control of the world. They both have global designs on the planet. And Satan has been working ceaselessly to provide a counterfeit Trinity, a counterfeit Messiah, a counterfeit prophet, and a counterfeit religion to offer as an alternative to biblical Christianity. And so I believe, and it may be different in one generation to the next because this is an ongoing battle, and Satan's tactic may change from one generation to the next. That's the way I understand Revelation, is that it's a reference of an ongoing conflict in the unseen world. And I think today, the religion that Satan is trying to prop up as the counterfeit religion, which he intends to be a world religion, is the religion of Islam. He wants everybody in the world to bow to Islam, and of course, that's what Islam wants. Submission is the only proper response to the message of Muhammad, the message of Islam. All right, Jack, I appreciate it, and it's good for us to be thinking about how Satan might be trying to use Islam to create a counterfeit world religion, to generate a counterfeit false prophet, and do his best to unseat Christ as the once and coming ruler of the world. Let's go to Terlisa in Little Rock, Arkansas. Terlisa, what's on your mind?
Hey, Brian, I can't believe I got in again, but you said we could talk about anything, and I was wondering why New York had to stop doing stopping the terrorism. That's kind of crazy because we're supposed to be protecting people, and isn't that kind of like yelling fire in a theater?
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's what that is, and why have we kind of stopped?
Well, a judge made him do it, Terlisa. That's the only reason. An activist judge made him stop. Says you can't do that. That's discrimination. Can't do it. And so now the people of New York are less safe because an activist judge substituted his own values for the values that are enshrined in the law. So that's the explanation for it. And now New York is less safe. Judges also intervened and wrecked this proactive policing. Remember, they were doing stop and frisk. Again, this was under Mayor Bloomberg, very aggressive policing. They saw somebody acting suspiciously, they would stop them and they would frisk them. And the crime rate in New York plummeted. It just went into the basement. And now that they've pulled back on stop and frisk, the crime rates are starting to climb back up. All right, Talisa, that's the answer to that question as well as so many others. An activist judge is the culprit. Let's go to Zachary in Orange, Texas. Zachary, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian, just want to thank you for allowing me the time to come on the air, and really glad that you brought up the Qur'an because I'm actually a Sunday school leader at my local church, and I teach a group of college students. I'm a college student myself. And whenever I was doing some research on the Muslim faith and ways that we can reach out to the Muslims, a lot of other religions, they don't incorporate Jesus into their religion at all. So I thought that it was really interesting, the passages that you had brought up, because I believe it gives us the way to be able to encourage Muslims, if you have some sort of relationship with them, I guess, do a little bit more research on the identity of Jesus, because we know that the Bible is very well documented. We have a lot of manuscripts, and if they do their research, I think that they'll come to the conclusion that Jesus was who he said that he was, and there's no other way that he could just be a prophet, as what's stated in the Quran. So by them already having that relationship, I think we can encourage them and put them in the right direction and guide them to that relationship with Christ.
And I think that's maybe a fruitful way to go, Zachary, in a conversation with a Muslim, because their own scriptures, what they consider their holy book, identifies Jesus as the Messiah. And it would be possible for us, look, our Bible identifies, our holy book identifies Jesus as the Messiah. And here's the difference between the way our holy book describes the Messiah and identifies him and the way your holy book does. These are the differences between Islam and Christianity. You know, Islam teaches that he was not crucified on the cross. Christianity teaches that he was. Islam teaches that God does not have a son. Christianity teaches that the Messiah is the Son of God. In fact, Christianity teaches that he is God incarnate. Islam says no, that cannot happen. So those are the differences between the Messiah as described in Islam and in Christianity. All right, thanks, Zachary. God bless you in your ministry there. Let's go to Chris in Texas. Chris, I got about 20 seconds. Hit me with your best shot.
Yes, I just want to see what you might have to say about the rebuttal, about the Democratic rebuttal that they're going to come out with, saying that there was no evidence that they know about, that there's more evidence beyond the dossier that is not showing in the dossier.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in the second hour, Chris, so if you stay tuned, we're going to get into that in the second hour. Appreciate the call. That'll get us oriented toward that topic. Focal Point, American Family Radio. That's it for the first hour. Stay with us. We'll be right back for hour number 2. Don't go anywhere.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
EngageMagazine.net, an online group of millennials brought together by a common goal to share truth, apply scripture, and to get involved in our lost and hurting world. With weekly articles to encourage you in your spiritual walk, EngageMagazine.net hosts discussions that help you apply a biblical worldview to your daily life to make a difference. EngageMagazine.net.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. The Democrats are now planning to release their own rebuttal memo to the one released last week by Republicans. The Democrats say their version will explain the FBI's role in the Russia investigation. Speaker of the House Paul Ryan is saying it is important that the American people see both sides of the information and that the bigger picture is about an abuse of power within the political system.
FISA abuse, and this is about holding our government accountable, and this is about Congress doing its job and conducting oversight over the executive branch, which in this particular case has been given great power over us as citizens. We need to make sure that that power is used correctly.
The House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence voted unanimously to release the Democrat version of the memo Monday. The U.S. Air Force conducted a record-setting airstrike in Afghanistan. Lucas Tomlinson has the latest.
A record number of laser-guided bombs were dropped by B-52 bombers on the Taliban in northern Afghanistan over the past 4 days, thanks to a newly installed launcher inside the Cold War-era bomber in November. The new U.S. strategy is to take out Taliban training camps and drug labs, key revenue sources which were previously off-limits. Stolen Afghan National Army vehicles were also targeted over the weekend. Taking out ISIS oil robbed the terror group of millions of dollars, and the Pentagon wants to apply the same strategy against the Taliban to turn the tide after recent deadly attacks in Kabul. At the Pentagon, Lucas Tomlinson, Fox News.
The federal appeals court is considering a 70-year-old woman's sexual orientation case. Jeff Manasso explains.
The 7th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals hears arguments in Marcia Wetzel's case that alleges that Glen St. Andrew Living Center in Niles in suburban Chicago did nothing to stop residents from hurling slurs, spitting on her, and physically harassing her because of her sexual orientation. A lower court dismissed the case last year, concluding that Wetzel hadn't shown that administrators displayed any discriminatory animus, motive, or intent. But if the appeals court reinstates it, the case could help establish that federal Fair Housing Act protections extend to LGBT tenants. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
In response to President Trump's State of the Union address, the head of the National Day of Prayer Task Force is hoping the U.S. and its leaders can lay down the differences that cause division and work together to become a stronger America. Bill Bumpus reports.
Arkansas pastor Ronnie Floyd, president of the National Day of Prayer Task Force, says there was something in Mr. Trump's speech that every American could celebrate, adding that it laid down an optimistic vision for a better America.
What the president talked about was very much calling for unity in our country, really in the most powerful way and most compelling way that I've ever seen him do it before. I thought the speech was exceptional. I think it's historic. I think that most people that heard it knows that that was a pretty significant speech.
Floyd tells AFN that, first of all, the church needs to unite, and as the church goes, so goes the nation.
And I think that one of the reasons the nation's divided is to somewhat degree the church is divided, and that's not healthy. That's not what Jesus wants out of his church, according to John 17.
He says it's through the supernatural power of God that unity takes place, and he believes God is leading officials with the National Day of Prayer, which takes place on May 3rd, to call America to unity. I'm Bill Bumpus.
Authorities have named a suspect in a child porn video which went viral.
Police in Alabama are searching for a 44-year-old in a child porn video being shared around the world by people trying to help find him. The young girl in it now said to be located and safe. The man identified as Jermaine Moore, wanted by the Alabama Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force for 11 felony charges, including the sex assault of a child, distribution of video depicting the assault, and criminal sexual conduct. He's also wanted in Detroit, where prosecutors say he sexually assaulted 3 girls. Moore's wife has been detained, and authorities say she's not cooperating. Police also warning that even people trying to be helpful can be charged for sharing the video. Lillian Wu, Fox News.
American Family News is available online at onenewsnow.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty P.
Exposing Washington with Walker Wildman.
So who is responsible for the dysfunction in Washington? That's what we're going to be discussing today.
We have become one of the most litigious societies on the planet.
The goal of this show is to bring clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C., and to expose the deception that has plagued our nation's capital for decades.
Exposing Washington.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central.
On American Family Radio.
3 months before she was exonerated, they were already drafting the statement. Doesn't that sound like it was cooked?
Yes, it does. It sounds like the thumb is on the scale.
Why would the Russians want Donald Trump to be president of the United States when they can get everything they want from Hillary Clinton? Whether it's uranium, whether it's undermining our defense by cutting military spending, by refusing to secure our border. Why in the world would the Russians want Trump?
He's the president of the United States. Refusing to cooperate, I think, will speak volumes.
The judge was not told that this dossier was the product of Democratic funding.
The FBI and Department of Justice did disclose to the FISA court that this was likely supported by a political act with a political motivation. I think it's very misleading to suggest that the FISA court had no idea there might be a political motivation.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name, and you are listening to Focal Point, the home of ethanol-free radio. Nothing but high-octane jet fuel powering the USS Focal Point. Glad to have you on board and in the conversation. We're happy every year to partner with our good friends at India Partners to raise the profile of the work that they are doing, the great work that they are doing in Mumbai, India, among children who are being trafficked into the sex industry there. Boys and girls as young as 8 years old are being trafficked and sold into the red light areas of Mumbai. Many of the young girls become mothers as soon as they become biologically able. And so what India Partners does is they've set up these safe houses that are away from the red light districts where these children, the children of trafficked women, remember these women get trafficked in there when they're very young, they become young mothers, they have children, and there's a place now for their children to go where they will be safe. They're called safe houses. They can escape the brothel areas and they can be relocated, and they'll get safety, rescue, and care. They're going to get an education. They will get medical care. They will get counseling that they need. They'll get private tutoring. They'll get medical attention. And most of all, someone will share with them the love of Jesus. And you can provide 1 day of that kind of safety, rescue, and care for one of these children for $7.08. Get a memo pad out because I'll give you the phone number that you can use. You can also make a donation at afr.net. The phone number here is 877-616-2396, 877-616-2396. You can give online at afr.net. So $7.08, that's a day of safety, rescue, and care for one child. So $50 will provide about a week of safety and rescue and care. $100 will provide 2 weeks. $212 will provide an entire month of safety and rescue and care. $640, that's 3 months worth of safety, rescue, and care, and $2,560 for those that are able. That will provide an entire year of safety, rescue, and care for these young boys and girls in the red light district. One of the things they're working on this year, in years past, the gifts that you've given have gone toward completing the girls' safe house. This year, gifts will go toward completing the purchase and expansion and ongoing work of a new boys' safe house where they can be as safe as the girls. Again, that's 877-616-2396 or online at afr.net. All right.
Can I say something real quick about that?
Yes, sir.
I actually had the opportunity to go there and actually see the work that's being done there by India Partners. And the one thing that will strike out right away is the difference, not only in the appearance of what these little girls are wearing, compared to being in the red light district versus in these safe houses, it's the appearance on their face. They know that Jesus Christ was responsible for rescuing them. And it's true for all of us, but I mean, it is obvious on these girls' faces.
See it on their faces.
Oh, yeah.
That's got to be a sweet thing to see. All right, again, that's India Partners. Number is 877-616-2396. Online at afr.net. Well, let's get into some stuff about this memo that the Democrats are going to release. It's interesting. It's got a certain amount of classified information in it, like they're daring Donald Trump. They want to try to release this thing with the classified information in it to try to dare Donald Trump to suppress it. Then everybody can accuse him of not wanting the truth to come to light. So they're trying to box him in by putting this classified information in there and daring him to keep it secret. Now here's Jim Jordan, clip number R2. He's one of the really good guys, part of the House Freedom Caucus. And he talks about the other people that are involved and this second dossier that's going to come out. Here's Jim Jordan talking about who the Democrats hired to compile that dossier.
The names we keep hearing are Sidney Blumenthal and Cody Shearer. People have been around the Clintons forever as being a part of this. But I also think it's kind of interesting because what it looks like is they paid Steele to put together the dossier. Then they told him what to put in it. Talk about rigging the game and putting together a document that's going to serve your purposes as an opposition research document. That's what it looks like the Clinton team did.
You know, and Chris Swecker is a 23-year veteran FBI. He said, look, this thing was not even a real investigation because the fix was in before they ever started. They knew that the FBI agents that were experienced when this thing was going down, they knew this was not a genuine investigation. They never once convened a grand jury, and they kept hearing that Deputy Director McCabe was expressing his opinions in closed-door meetings all the time about Trump, and they were not objective. They were not neutral. They were highly critical, and therefore Schwecker says, look, we are talking about a predetermined investigation. Remember that James Comey started writing the memo that exonerated Hillary Clinton weeks before he ever interviewed her or about 15 or 16 other witnesses in that probe. And so Schwecker says, look, this is a predetermined investigation. This is not how the FBI as a whole operates. FBI agents on the street simply do not operate in this fashion. Now let's go to clip number 1. This is Senator Blumenthal again, kind of talking about how they're trying to box Donald Trump in.
And then he would have to invoke the Fifth Amendment in order to avoid responding to questions, which I think would be a profound sign, adding to this case of obstruction of justice. Remember that he's the President of the United States. Ultimately, he is responsible for enforcing the law. He's dragged the FBI into the muck and mire of partisan politics, trying to discredit what the FBI has found in the course of its investigation. Now his refusing to cooperate, I think, will speak volumes, really incredible volumes about his potential culpability for obstruction of justice. And he'll have to take the Fifth Amendment if he's subpoenaed the grand jury if he wishes to avoid answering questions.
So they're saying, look, if he takes the Fifth Amendment, this is going to be evidence all by itself of obstruction of justice. This is a terrible thing for somebody who works for the people to do. Somebody who is an employee of the federal government takes the Fifth. The question is, what are they trying to hide? Now, this reminds me, does it not, of all of the fury and the outrage that we heard from Democrats like Senator Blumenthal when Lois Lerner kept taking the Fifth Amendment. Remember that?
Yeah.
Remember how outraged the Democrats were? How they pressured her to come clean and tell the truth about what she was trying to hide from investigators and confess what the IRS was doing to make life difficult for Tea Party groups. Remember that outrage and all of that fury? No, I don't either, now that you mention it. So. And we got some more sound bites when we come back to follow up on this. You know, and part of the deal, you know, Jim Jordan referred to this, that there were Clinton acolytes that were feeding the information to Steele, as he wrote it back in 2.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
Socialized medicine is not patient or parent friendly. Last year, British courts claimed the life of little Charlie Gard. This year, it's Elfie Evans, a 20-month-old boy with a mystery disease that causes seizures. British doctors say continuing treatment is unkind and want the courts to let them pull the plug on Elfie. His parents want to take him out of the country for treatment, saying he still responds to them. It's never good when courts become deciders of life and death and hospitals become prisons that hold children against the will of the parents. But this is socialized medicine, and we Americans should set a course back to health freedom before socialism begins to claim the lives of American children.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
Isn't that a beautiful sound? That sonogram holds the sound of a baby's heartbeat. Hi, I'm Jim Stanley, General Manager for AFR. We're partnering with the Ministry of Preborn to help save babies' lives. Preborn partners with pregnancy centers throughout America in helping abortion-minded women choose life through ultrasound. By letting a mother hear her baby's heartbeat and see her baby in the womb, she will choose life 80% of the time. Ultrasound is a game changer. For $140, you can provide 5 ultrasounds. All gifts are tax deductible, and 100% of your gift goes to saving babies. You can save a baby's life right here in America by donating to Preborn. To donate, dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Or donate securely at preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Your love can save a life.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio, the second hour. Welcome if you're catching us live streaming on Facebook. You can go to our Facebook page right now. You can participate in the online discussion of the program by making comments and dropping your notes there at our Focal Point Facebook page. You go to Focal Point Brian Fisher, go take you right to the page. And by the way, we're now on the YouTube channel. If you go to the YouTube channel, and you'll find the link to the YouTube channel on our Facebook page, and you can subscribe. I did yesterday. Debbie beat me to the punch. She got there 3 people before I did. So we both subscribed to the YouTube channel. And we will talk. I don't think I brought that with me, Jeff. I want to talk about the number of communities. You sent it to me in an email. The number of communities that we're now going to be available in now that we're on the YouTube channel.
The YouTube channel's going anywhere. We're talking about
this is anywhere. And
So
those are communities that actually have a television station.
Correct.
That's streaming the program live into those communities.
Yes, but I can't really talk about it yet because we're still working out the
details,
technical kind of issues.
But it gets on the YouTube channel. That's available to anybody anywhere in the country.
Yeah, we do have a Roku channel, and we'll talk about that a little bit next week. That's got, we're making this stuff available. So if people want to televise or stream, we're making it a lot easier for people to do that. So
all right. So you can subscribe to the YouTube page. Remember, you can catch us on one of our 184 radio stations. That's still available as an option. You got to live in a community with one of our stations in it. You can do that. You can live stream us at Facebook, as many of you are doing right now. You can also audio stream us live by going to afr.net.
This list is getting pretty long. It's going to take you half a segment just to get through of all the ways we're coming at people now.
Yeah. You can run, but you cannot hide.
We're going to get you.
Yeah, we'll get you one way or another. And also, don't forget podcasts. We got podcasts where you can catch the program at your leisure.
And sometimes you can catch parts of the broadcast on Right Wing Watch.
Yeah.
That's almost regular, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah. Let's play another Adam Schiff clip. This is clip number 2. The interview here is a man by the name of Mark Scudo. And here is, he's talking here first, and then Adam Schiff responds, clip 2. By the way, Adam Schiff, we found out, is connected by marriage to George Soros. Apparently,
it's George Soros' son is married to Schiff's sister.
All right, so
I think they may be divorced now, but they were married 22 years.
Yeah, and apparently,
and people are talking like, but I have to check out this information a little more. But that George Soros or the Soroses were very influential in furthering Schiff's
launching his political career. Yeah. All right, this is clip number 2. This is Adam Schiff.
The two central allegations of the Nunes memo. One was that the Russia investigation, the Carter Page warrant, based entirely on the dossier. We've heard you contest that, but we just heard a Republican, Trey Gowdy, in effect, rebut that as well. But the other one was that the Democrats, that when the Justice Department and the FBI considered this, this warrant, the judge was not told that this dossier was the product of Democratic funding. It had that the Steele dossier had backing of the Democratic Party, etc. I understand you contest that argument as well. Tell us why.
Well, as you'll see in our response, and I can't go into the details until they're made public, the FBI and Department of Justice did disclose to the FISA court that this was likely supported by a political act with a political motivation. So that information is contained in the application. I think it's very misleading to suggest that the FISA court had no idea there might be a political motivation at work.
You know, the phrase that was in the Steele dossier said a political entity. That's interesting. So you talk about something that is misleading, something that is designed on its face to obscure the truth about where the source of the funding for this dossier came from. It came from the Democratic National Committee, and it came from the campaign coffers of Hillary Clinton. And yet the writers of the memo wanted to obscure that, or the writers of the dossier, or the memo rather, they tried to obscure that from the FISA judges by saying it came from a political entity. And now Adam Schiff wants us to believe that that represented full disclosure. No, nobody was trying to hide anything from anybody. Now, Eric Swalwell from California, clip number 3, he's on with Aaron Burnett of Outfront CNN, and listen to what he admits here.
And we can't rely on Bob Mueller to be the insurance policy because the president is doing all he can to undermine that investigation.
Now, that is interesting to me because, remember, the phrase insurance policy came up in the text between Lisa Page and her lover. What was the guy's name? The Lisa Page and
I forgot.
What was the guy's name? I've gone blank.
Real quick.
But Lisa Page's James Strzok.
Yeah.
Peter Strzok. Yeah. Peter Strzok. And remember he used that expression, insurance policy. We can't take the chance that Donald Trump will win the election. We need an insurance policy to keep that from happening. And everybody's wondered, well, what is the insurance policy? What is it? Well, now Eric Swalwell, he might have slipped on this, might have admitted something, wasn't supposed to, but divulged that the insurance policy was Bob Mueller. And he says we can't rely on Bob Mueller to be the insurance policy because the president's trying to undermine that investigation. So Bob Mueller is our insurance policy. We don't know that we're going to be able to count on that because Donald Trump is trying to undermine that by the investigation. So I think that's a pretty significant admission there. Now, here is a former CIA counterterrorism official. His name is Phil Mudd. He used to work for the CIA. He's on CNN, and he raises the stakes here in clip number 4.
The workforce is going to look at this and say, this is an attack on our ability to conduct an investigation with integrity. There's hundreds of agents and analysts working on this investigation. It's not just Christopher Wray, the FBI director. So the FBI people, I'm going to tell you, are ticked. and they're going to be saying, I guarantee it, you think you can push us off this because you can try to intimidate the director? You better think again, Mr. President. You've been around for 13 months. We've been around since 1908. I know how this game is going to be played. We're going to win.
So he's basically throwing down on Donald Trump on behalf of the CIA, challenging Donald Trump. You're a pipsqueak. You're a lightweight. You're a rookie. You've been around here for 13 months. We've been playing this game for 108 years. And we are going to take you down if you try to take us on. So that just amounts to basically just to a threat. I mentioned this Chris Schwecker. He had a 24-year career in the FBI. He's being interviewed here by Ed Henry of Fox News. Let's listen to clip number 5.
Well, I had the perspective of serving directly under Director Mueller. I bet I sat in on 500-plus meetings with him and Director Free. And these were two great leaders. They stayed in the background. I never saw a hint of bias. Unfortunately, under Jim Comey, that hubris that you just mentioned caused him to make up his own rules. Leaks, permissive leak environment, predetermining investigations, a non-investigation of the Clinton email investigation, thumb on the scale on the Russian investigation in the beginning here with the FISA applications, and just generally making up their own rules and letting their own political opinions infect their investigation. In fact, that is something you learn at the FBI Academy. You can't let your personal bias, you got to leave those at home. If not, you need to be in another line of business.
So Chris Schwecker saying, look, what has come out to this point just reveals a really seedy side of James Comey and the upper leadership in the FBI. And again, and all these people are quick, I think, to make sure that we don't think that this is true of FBI agents in general, because it's not. There's 25, 30,000 FBI agents, and these guys are at pains to say, look, those guys that are out there on the street and busting criminals day in and day out, those guys are the cream of the crop, and they're just doing their jobs. They're pursuing law, they're pursuing disorder and disorder, they're pursuing the bad guys, and they're going to do it without any kind of bias. But what we're seeing here, Chris Schwecker is saying, is that there's corruption at the very top of the FBI, and you can trace it right to James Comey's office. So you've got these predetermined investigations. You see that with Hillary Clinton and the email investigation that presumed to be an investigation conducted by the FBI. Well, remember, Comey started writing the exoneration letter 3 weeks before he'd even interviewed Hillary Clinton. It was already written, already in the can. So it was just a formality to interview her because the exoneration had been written before the evidence had been gathered and the interviews were even completed. Put a thumb on the scale in the Russian investigation. That's what the Steele dossier was all about. Puts the thumb on the scale on that, so tipping the scales there, not being neutral, not just following the evidence wherever it leads, but shading the evidence, concealing what was inconvenient, calling it a political entity rather than revealing the identity of the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign, which certainly would have raised the eyebrows of the judges that were going to issue the FISA warrant. I'm talking about the application for the FISA warrant that was on there. And they say, look, that's certainly going to raise the eyebrows of these FISA judges because they're pretty much straight shooters, I believe, from everything I know. And something that's going to manifest that much evident bias, they are not going to be down with that. So said, look, they're making up their own rules as they go, letting their own political opinions clearly infect their investigations. This is just bad biscuits, bad piece of business on the part of the FBI. Here is Chris Schwecker, clip number 2. This is clip 6, talking again with Ed Henry, Fox News.
I'm an outsider. We're outsiders. We don't know how the FBI does its job.
Right.
Is that the proper way? I mean, people on the outside hear that and say 3 months before she was exonerated, they were already drafting the statement. Doesn't that sound like it was cooked?
Yes, it does. It sounds like the thumb is on the scale. I mean, those of us that have done criminal investigations and counterintelligence investigations know that the Clinton email investigation was not a real investigation. They never once used a grand jury that I know of. We're hearing, those of us that are in the retired agent community, we're hearing that Deputy Director McCabe was expressing his opinions in closed-door meetings all the time about Trump. So we're talking about a predetermined investigation, and that is just not how the FBI as a whole operates.
Okay, predetermined investigation. Andrew McCabe making his opinions clearly known to everybody, which again is not the way the FBI conducts its business. They're taught at the academy, as he mentioned earlier. You have to set aside your own political opinions. You just have to look at the law, and you look at behavior, and that's it. Those are the only two things you consider. You don't let what somebody else's political opinions are affect the way you look at them. You're looking just at their behavior and how it comports with the law. Focal Point, American Family Radio. Be right back. Stay with us.
I've been an advocate for biblically responsible investing for many, many years, 30 years, because I'm an advocate for permanent income. This is Dan Celia from Financial Issues. I remember having two sisters that had trust funds that I managed. They were family trust. They were the third generation. They were in their 80s. They had more money than you could shake a stick at. They didn't want for anything. And even them, at one point in time, said to me, do we have enough income to pay our bills, our electric bill? That's all they cared about. I'm telling you, you're going to get to that point. So it's not an investment. It's a gift. It's permanent income.
Find out about charitable gift annuities when you call 800-326-4543, extension 345. 800-326-4543, extension 345. Or by visiting afafoundation.net.
Every day in the red light districts of Mumbai, India, there are children as young as 8 being trafficked and exploited. And it isn't just young girls they're looking for. Some men are looking for young boys. This cannot go on any longer. Team up with American Family Radio and India Partners. With your gift of just $7.08, you provide a day of safety and shelter at a new India Partners safe house far away from the city. That's $7.08 means school, shelter, meals, and the love of Jesus. Coming up here on American Family Radio, we're going to address the issue of child trafficking, but we aren't going to do it in a way that is graphic or unsafe for your children to hear. But we will tell you now that we're going to address a topic that could, for some, be uncomfortable. We hope you'll listen and team up with American Family Radio and India Partners to provide hope for a new safe house for boys in the red light district. Get more information at afr.net.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher. Brian J. Fisher.
Welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. The program is Focal Point. Brian Fisher is my name, congenial, convivial, and amiable. As always, talking here about this 10-page memo that the Democrats are going to release, apparently heavily redacted already, even though apparently one of the items that's been redacted, from what I've read, is a story from the Washington Post, which by definition is not classified information, so it's hard to know exactly what's going on there. Some suspicion that it's going to be laced with classified information, trying to dare Donald Trump to spike it so they can accuse him of wanting to keep information from coming to light. If he does his job and protects that information, keeps it from coming to light, then they can accuse him of that. If he releases it, then they accuse him of being fast and loose with classified information. And we told you couldn't trust this guy, sloppy with America's secrets. So that's what they are trying to do. Now, got a couple of Mark Levin clips here. Clip number 7. This is Mark Levin talking about this whole idea that Russia colluded with Trump. The whole idea, just the concept that Russia would want to work with Trump to defeat Hillary. Here's what Mark Levin had to say about that.
I am telling you, we're looking at the FBI, we're looking at the Department of Justice, and we're not looking at all at the White House. Hillary Clinton paid for a warrant. That's the easiest way we can put it. Hillary Clinton colluded with the Russians, but it appears the FBI at the senior-most levels colluded with the Russians too. Whether it was witting or unwitting, it doesn't matter. That's a fact. So the senior level of the FBI tried to interfere with this election as well. This is why it's such a big deal. Now, I know Republicans are bending over backwards saying this has nothing to do with Mueller. It has everything to do with Mueller, because it transitioned from a counterintelligence investigation into a criminal investigation after Comey, of all things, confesses to being a leaker. And Mueller is the former FBI director. Those are his people. That's his environment. He's not out there as some independent force.
All right, so that's Mark Levin. You know, and he raises a good question. You know, why would the Russians want Hillary Clinton to win this election? And Hillary Clinton basically says what happened is Hillary Clinton purchased this warrant. She paid for it, put good money up to get this cockamamie Steele dossier put together that would be convincing, they believed, in the eyes of the FISA judges. And so she got her warrant and paid good money, 160 grand, to get it. But that's not how you're supposed to get warrants. Warrants are issued on the basis of probable cause, and FBI agents have to convince the judges that they've got the goods or they've got credible information that raises a clear suspicion about the conduct of everybody involved in this deal. Now, here's Mark Levin, clip number 2, where he explores in a little more detail this issue of the Russians wanting to help Hillary.
But I want to get back to Barack Obama. It's his FBI, his Department of Justice, his State Department, his candidate. I cannot believe for a minute that the National Security Council didn't know about this. And to show you how elaborate this is, now that more information's coming out, we haven't even gotten to the incidental collection of intelligence on people, including, by the way, Sessions when he met with and spoke to the Russian ambassador, Michael Flynn when he spoke to the Russian ambassador, the unmasking and leaking of his name, the record number of unmasking of American citizens in Trump world, and so forth and so on. And the American people have been subjected to a massive propaganda and misinformation campaign by the Clinton campaign, by the Obama administration. Let me ask you a logical question, Sean. Why would the Russians want Donald Trump to be president of the United States where they can get everything they want from Hillary Clinton? Whether it's uranium, whether it's undermining our defense by cutting military spending, by refusing to secure our border. Why in the world would the Russians want Trump as opposed to Hillary Clinton?
You know, this is something that we talked about early in this deal. It just made no sense to me that the Russians would prefer Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump, at minimum, was a wild card. He was unpredictable, and the Russians would have known that. But Hillary Clinton, they were able to play her for a patsy. That whole business with the reset button where she didn't have the right word on the reset button, supposed to be the Russian word for reset. Instead, it was the Russian word for overcharge, like she put too much on her credit card account or something like that. So the Russians did not take Hillary Clinton seriously in any way. She wasn't any threat to them, nor was Barack Obama. Barack Obama was a pushover. You know, he'd draw red lines all the time and then ignore them when they got transgressed. So there just isn't any way, it doesn't make any sense that they would prefer Hillary Clinton as the president of the United States as opposed to Donald Trump. You know, Donald Trump had a strength, and I think, and I think they were afraid of his strength. I frankly think they were, because he's got bluster. I mean, that's one thing you're going to say about Donald Trump. He's got plenty of bluster, and maybe they would want to discount for that bluster and believe there wasn't any substance behind it. Well, why would you want to even take that chance? Maybe there was some bite behind that bark. So I think they felt like they could play Hillary, and besides, she basically handed them 20% of the United States uranium supply. They were going to get a deal like that from Donald Trump. Her husband got a $600,000 honorarium for giving a speech to some kind of Russian bank. They're not going to get that that kind of access with Donald Trump. So it never did make sense to me. Or something just seemed off about that whole theory, and that's what Levin is talking about here. This just does not make any sense. So anyway, we'll know more about this memo. It's going to be released, I believe, today, and so we will see what's in it. You know, one of the things that we are learning is that Clinton associates were feeding Trump dossier information to Christopher Steele while he was raiding this. I mean, what we're told is that Christopher Steele went out there and did all this independent research. He did this research with all of his contacts in the Russian underworld, and he came up with the information. Now we're finding out that he was fed a lot of what was in there by those that were buddies of Hillary Clinton's. And by the way, John McCain really looks pretty bad in all of this, because he's the one that he went out of his way to try to make sure that that this memo got into the hands of people who could do harm to Donald Trump. McCain was the one that went out of his way to see that that happened. The founders of Fusion GPS, this is according to Breitbart.com, the founders of Fusion GPS helped Steele share the document with the Arizona senator, with John McCain, utilizing a surrogate after the November 2016 presidential election. McCain, in turn, reportedly provided the dossier to the FBI in December 2016. So McCain personally delivered the dossier to the FBI. The timeline revealed in the memo shows that by the time McCain delivered the dossier to the FBI leadership in December 2016, the agency had not only already launched an investigation into Trump's campaign, partially utilizing the dossier, but Comey himself had 2 months earlier signed off on the thing. So it was like McCain was so determined to make sure the FBI had it, he got it in their hands even after their investigation had already started, because he wanted to make sure no stone was left unturned. This is from hotair.com. According to a report at Fox News, the Democratic rebuttal memo is loaded with information on sources and methods in an effort to put the White House in a bind. The Democratic rebuttal is filled with sensitive details, a source told Fox News, claiming this was done intentionally to pressure the White House to either block the memo's release or significantly redact it. So either way, they can pile on Donald Trump for not wanting the public to know what's in it. Filled with information on sources and methods taken from original documents. And so Adam Schiff was already out there beating his chest, hoping that the White House, quote, does not redact our memo for political purposes. So the Democrats trying to out-Fox Donald Trump on that one. The Morning Joe hosts abruptly changed their minds on the Democratic memo in mid-broadcast today. They suddenly began to question whether the new memo, authored by Adam Schiff, even ought to see the light of day. This is a kind of an amazing switch. So they've got Swalwell, this guy from California, and here's Scarborough says, look, Congressman, I don't understand. Most of us around this table thought it was a terrible idea to release the Nunes memo, and after it was released, it was, in modern parlance, a nothing burger. Why reveal more sources if the Nunes memo was much ado about nothing? Scarborough goes on to say you're going to expose sources and processes based on a snap poll released after Nunes' bizarre memo. And after the interview was over, Scarborough wasn't done. I don't understand. I really don't. You can't say we have to do this to defend the FBI and the Justice Department on the one hand, and on the other hand say, well, that Nunes memo was a bomb. It was a bomb. The Nunes memo sets up a timeline that hurts Donald Trump. So why should the Democrats continue down this flawed path, this dangerous path? So Joe Scarborough switching horses in midstream. And by the way, Chris Stewart reminds us all that Dianne Feinstein and former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper have both said there is no evidence of collusion. Back in March 2017, Clapper told Chuck Todd that he had seen no evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. Quote, "We did not include any evidence in our report that had any reflection of collusion between members of the Trump campaign and the Russians. There was no evidence of that included in our report." So James Clapper, clean bill of health on Trump's collusion with the Russians. Feinstein told Wolf Blitzer March of 2017, she said, Blitzer said, if you'd actually seen evidence of collusion, you said you had not at that point, has anything changed? Feinstein says, well, no, it hasn't. Well, evidence that would establish there's collusion we haven't seen. All kind of rumors around, but we have seen no evidence of collusion. Back with your phone call. Stay with us.
Hi, this is Sandy Rios. God has called me to speak truth in these troubled days. In the old Soviet Union, initially, millions were murdered. After fear was instilled, lies became the standard. Christians met underground. They were prevented from employment, opportunity, and most of all, from exercising their own consciences. I fear this is where our nation is headed, unless we speak up.
Sandy Rios in the morning, weekdays at 7 Central on American Family Radio.
It says, and do the first works. What is that? Go back and begin by faith to obediently do what you did when you were first saved, that you're not doing anymore.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series Escape the Coming Night, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Attention all Christians who would like to become more effective in presenting and defending their beliefs. This is Alex McFarland, and I urge you to attend the 2018 edition of Truth for a New Generation, the conference on apologetics, worldview, and evidence for the Christian faith. TNG is coming to Greensboro, North Carolina, March 23 and 24. Hear an amazing lineup, including Josh McDowell, apologist J. Warner Wallace, Todd Starnes from Fox News, and much, much more.
This is Abraham Hamilton III of the American Family Association. We're in a battle for the future of our nation, and I want to see you at Truth for a New Generation as we pray and get equipped to defend the faith, asking God to save our nation.
Don't miss Truth for a New Generation, March 23 and 24, Greensboro, North Carolina. You may register at truthforanewgeneration.com.
Presented in part by the American Family Association.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. You know, one of the things that we have seen repeatedly in study after study is that illegal immigrants commit crimes at 2 to 3 times the rate as native-born Americans. It's indisputable, but the meme is still out there that no, illegal immigrants commit crime at lower rates than American citizens. Here's Jonathan Alter, clip number 9, repeating that myth and that lie.
This was in the context of putting immigration, making immigration be about crime. Remember, he wasn't speaking to dreamers in the balcony. He was pointing to victims of violent crime by immigrants who commit many fewer crimes than native-born Americans. So the whole context was fraudulent and misleading.
Except it was the absolute truth. You know, and Donald Trump talked about the fact there was a Baltimore Colts player that got killed by an illegal immigrant driving drunk, and he'd been deported twice. I don't know how many times he'd been arrested on DUIs, but this, you know, if it wasn't for him, there'd be 2 NFL players that would be alive today if Donald Trump had been president, the wall had built, and we had genuine border security. Number to call is 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840 is the number to call. Now, when this story first broke, apparently a memo went out to everybody in the Talking Snake media. You know, I subscribe to this thing from Merriam-Webster. It's called a word a day. So I get a word for every day. It's got the definition, and it's got examples of how it's used in a sentence. Well, the Democrat pipeline sent out a word for the day yesterday, and there are actually 2 words of the day. One was dud, and the other was Nothing Burger, and they apparently all got the memo. Let's listen.
The reviews are in, and Congressman Nunes's memo was a dud. The Nunes memo is a dud. Let's start with Sean Hannity. Not to be undeterred by the sort of dud factor of the memo.
That this memo was a complete dud. It overpromised and underdelivered.
I mean, it's pretty much a dud. I got to tell you, though, I mean, it's kind of a dud. It doesn't really deliver.
I prefer really big revealing documents to really narrow duds. This looks like a dud. I could tell you from reading this memo and consulting with a wide range of experts, it's a dud. This memo is a dud. Nothing. A dud. But it is nothing. A nothing burger.
And less interesting about this memo is what is in it. It's pretty much a nothing burger.
A nothing burger. Quote, dishonest, misleading, partisan nothing burger.
The only thing I fear from this memo, because I think it's really been a huge dud.
Some of the GOP Tea Party members were out there saying that this is the most vile thing they'd ever seen. And it's a big dud.
It's a dud.
Unfortunately, it fell flat yesterday, much, I think, to the chagrin of the president. This memo was a complete dud.
Everybody knows it was kind of a dud, even the people in the Republican Party who thought they were going to start some big trial balloon here. Nothing changed. It's almost an embarrassment.
Wow. So that was the marching orders, and they all got the message. I mean, it's amazing. They get phrases, they'll use the same phrase. I mean, you got something by osmosis, or maybe somebody hears it and says, hey, this is a great word to use, and send it out to all their buddies in the media. Spooky how that happens. 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Here is Chris Matthews, last clip of the day, then we'll go right to the phones. Chris Matthews, this is a new one on me. Listen to who he accuses of being a victim of racism.
Picking out somebody from one of the coasts, usually ethnic, and making them the poster person of the Democratic Party is old business for the Republicans. They did it with way back to some guy from the Bronx back in the 40s. They did it with Bella Abzug from the west side of New York City. They did it after Tip O'Neill. They did it after Teddy. Now they're doing it after Teddy Kennedy. Now they do it after Nancy Pelosi. They love to get an ethnic sort of person from one of the coasts and make them the bad person.
An ethnic sort of person means if you go after them, you're a racist. Because it's an ethnic sort of person. So now Nancy Pelosi is the victim of blatant racism, according to Chris Matthews. That means everybody is the victim of racism. All right, number to call, 888-589-8840. Let's talk about anything we've talked about on the program today, 888-589-8840. Let's begin with Cheryl in Quincy, Illinois. Cheryl, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hi, I just wanted to make the comment that I honestly hope that the Democrats keep pulling their stunt, because the way they're trying to box President Trump in with their memo and all the stuff that's in it, they're treating the American people again like we're stupid, like we're not able to figure that out. And not just, from the inauguration or his speech the other night, the State of the Address, how they looked ridiculous and like they were at a funeral. They just keep making moves, and I'm hoping that they keep it up, because I agree with you. I think Trump's playing chess and they're playing checkers.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. I think that they feel like the media, they feel like most people get their cues and their news from the media. So if they can control what people hear in the media, then they can control the narrative. That's why Trump has been so effective with his tweets, because he goes completely around all the normal organs. But, you have CBS, ABC, NBC, CNN, MSNBC. They all say the same thing. If you miss a story, how CNN covers it, go over to MSNBC. It'll be the same slant. If you miss it there, go over to the New York Times, be the same slant. Miss it there, go to Washington Post, same slant. So they feel like they can control the narrative, even though their narrative is flawed and not consistent with the facts. All right, Cheryl, good call. Thank you for that. Let's go to Fran in Columbus, Ohio. Fran, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hi, Brian. Real short and sweet. When they were talking about is Congress.
Okay, Fran, you cut out on us there for just a minute, maybe at the critical moment in your comment. Tell us again what you want to say.
Okay, when they were talking about dud this, dud that, well, the only dud is our Congress.
So Congress.
That's the dud.
Congress is the dud. That may be very well spoken. We'll give you kudos for that. So that's the new phrase of the day. Congress is the dud, courtesy of Fran in Columbus. All right, let's go to Frank in Dry Creek, Louisiana. Frank, what's on your mind?
Hello, Brian.
Hey.
I believe that we should pursue the judge who signed the FISA warrant because he has the truth. Either he knew that it was compromised information, or they withheld it from him. So Congress should investigate that. They can do it behind closed doors, but then they would know the truth, whether he was informed or he wasn't informed, and that would clear all that up.
Yeah. Well, I think there can be a problem getting to that because the identity of these FISA judges is tightly controlled. Their identities are concealed. They're hidden because they're dealing with the nation's secrets. They don't want their identities out there because they could be subject to who knows what. So I don't know if we'll ever find out who the FISA judge was that signed off on this warrant, but I'm with you, Frank. I'd love to know, love to pick his brain. And under a normal situation, that'd be one of the things you'd want to do in an investigation. Call him in for questioning. You can, like you said, it could be behind closed doors, so everybody's sworn to secrecy, and ask him, when you read this part of the dossier, for instance, when it said a political entity was behind this, what did you think? Did you suspect it might be something as big a player as the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign? Did that even cross your radar to think maybe that's where this was coming from and that kind of stuff? Did you have any suspicions based on this part of the memo or that part of the memo? Love to get that information. I doubt that we will. All right, Frank, that's a good call. Let's go to Billy in Florence, Alabama. Billy in Florence, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
What's on my mind, what you said about news media, and what the Democrats like to do is they like to propaganda over the main media, and that's the reason why President Obama, when he was president, he kept on saying we only have freedom of worship, because in Cuba you cannot hand out religious materials because the Democrats don't want us to know the truth. They don't want their people to know the truth, and so by saying only religious freedom of worship, people don't get out and go out and teach like they should.
Yeah. Well, and you're right. And again, that's part of their effort to control the narrative. Barack Obama, for instance, the Constitution doesn't guarantee freedom of worship. And Billy's right. He used that term to try to make us think that all the Constitution protects is your right to worship God like you want to from 11 to noon every Sunday in your church building. And the other 167 hours don't belong to God or to you. They belong to the government. That's the impression he wanted to create by careful choice of language. So they try to control the language. They try to control the lingo. They try to control the key terms and the meaning that people give to those key terms because they know the truth is not on their side. All right, Billy. All right, let's go to Richard in Texas. Last call of the day. Richard, let me know what's on your mind. Got 30 seconds. Hit me with your best shot.
Brian, you just got through saying that they don't know who the judge is. I read about that FISA judge on Breitbart yesterday. He's Hispanic.
So they got his identity. All right.
He was on Breitbart.
Okay, well, I'll have to do some poking around after the program and get caught up to where you're at, Richard. All right, appreciate the call. We'll track that down and see exactly what we find. Well, that's it for today's edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Do not forget to bow low before God, stand tall before man. Oh, I got a minute to go? All right. Well, anyway, I got a minute to go.
We could start playing the music just for fun, though.
Just really string it out. Play it in slow motion. Yeah. So I'm a little premature, but do not forget to bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap wherever God has placed you, and remember, we are fighting a winnable war. Here is the last little factoid of the day. The myth out there is that meditation makes people peaceful. I'm going to come back to this tomorrow, but an extensive study, the Dalai Lama says if every 8-year-old in the world was taught meditation, the world would be without violence within one generation. Turns out he was wrong. Scientists have revealed the trendy Buddhist practice does not make you more compassionate. less aggressive, or prejudiced. Meditation doesn't change how adults behave toward others. We'll talk about this more tomorrow. See you then.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
The American Family Association exists to inform, equip, and activate us so we can strengthen the moral foundations of American culture. AFA gives aid to the church here and abroad in its task of fulfilling the Great Commission. You can find out what's happening at AFA on Facebook, like the page, and stay active and informed.
Faith, family, freedom.